Koski, founder of Maggie Marilyn. We're a brand based in New Zealand. We launched almost 4 years ago, which is crazy. Time has flown by. But I studied sustainability at university, so I always knew that that was going to be an inbuilt practice and mindset from the very beginning when we started the brand. But we've learnt so much over 4 years in terms of what building a sustainable brand looks like. And we launched a new line in November last year, which has the intention to be fully circular. So we're kind of new into our circularity journey, but something that I'm really excited by.
Wonderful, wonderful. And Gonzalo, what about you?
Yeah, so I'm Gonzalo Pertile, and I'm the Director of Corporate Social Responsibility at Madewell. I joined the company over 2 years ago, and I did, my background is on business management, and then I started doing a master's in international development at, here in the US at Duke University. And I always knew that I had a passion for social impact. So all my jobs have someone being related to social impact. I was working in Guatemala for 6 years in the Inter-American Development Bank, working with governments to make them more efficient. And then when I moved to the US to pursue my master's, I also knew that after graduating, I wanted to do something related to that. So the opportunity presented to work, first it was a corporate role for the J.Crew group, serving both the J.Crew brand and the Madewell brand. And recently I pivoted into supporting Madewell only. And the work that we do is very focused on sustainability work and how we can make our supply chain greener from a product perspective, looking at the whole life cycle of products.
It must be so interesting to work with such a big established company on corporate social responsibility. I'm so excited to hear more about that. But you also have your own business, right?
I also have my own business. When I was living in Guatemala, I co-founded a social enterprise that works with artisans, and we connect them to international markets. So we always work with traditional techniques, so petal loom, backstrap loom, all ancient techniques. But what we do is that we imprint a lot of contemporary design into the products, and we bring them into market so that we can also support artisans back in Guatemala and funnel back funds that could be helping the artisans and promoting that economic development in the country. So it's also related to sustainability, social impact, mostly from a vendor perspective, because a majority of our business is wholesale. So we are vendors of large brands here in the US as well.
Very cool, very cool. Natasha, tell us about Aeon.
It's so nice to meet all the fellow panelists. Thank you so much, Thousand Fell. I'm Natasha. I'm founder and CEO of Aeon, and we are a connected products company. So we work with large global brands, and essentially we digitize their products such that products can be identified from the moment they're produced throughout the supply chain, bringing transparency, and then also identified after point of sale such that they can be resold and recycled. So we basically work with large global brands like the H&Ms of the world, from the PVHs to the sustainability leaders with Gabrielle Hearst on the luxury side, enabling their businesses to really embrace transparency and circular economy.
Wonderful. Chloe and Stuart, do you all need no introduction, or for the sake of ceremony, would you tell us a bit about Thousand Fell?
Chloe,
Yeah.
go.
You want to go for it? Or
You got it.
we can, or just kind of piggyback kind of the way you all did. Stuart and I, we met in China 6 years ago, and we were both working for other larger brands. So I had worked at Alexander Wang Group and then Gap, and Stuart was running a big footwear brand out of southern China. And so we started, kind of the impetus to starting Thousand Fell was what we saw really close to the means of production living in Asia and working closely with factories and sourcing partners. And so now we've launched Thousand Fell. It's super new, and our whole focus is on designing into retail systems that don't create waste. So how can we design out waste at the manufacturing level, but then also at the end of life of a product? And so we started with sneakers, but really excited for Circularity Week because this is so near and dear to our heart, and just trying to figure out how we can contribute in a value add way to the larger discussion about sustainability within retail. But these guys are also real experts that have been doing like big groundbreaking work within retail. So we're thrilled to be speaking with them.
And your shoes are also great and super cute as well, in addition to being really amazing from a sustainability standpoint.
Thank you.
But okay, so to start, I think it's important that we get some of the vocabulary down. And so I'd love if each of you could define for me what the circular economy is and what circular fashion is. Natasha, why don't we start with you?
So when I look at circular economy is both a system that emulates a system like those in nature, where all the materials and resources are continuously used and reused. And it's also, the key part of it is it's an economy. It's a business model. So it's about actually enabling business and innovation and design to operate in a way that enables that circular system.
Mm-hmm. And Gonzalo, what do you think about when you think of circular economy and how it relates to your work?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we are looking at the circular economy is an alternative to the traditional linear model that takes resources, makes a product, and then those products are discarded. So there's a lot of waste, as we were talking before. So it's parting ways with that traditional linear model and making sure that you're able to keep the materials in use for as long as possible. And then once you get to the end of life of a product, look for ways that then you can have those materials being reused, repaired, or recycled so that they can put back again into the system and create that circular model that it's also like a closed loop system where you can use a textile to create new textiles. And that's what we should all be aiming for. So it's something new, it's evolving, it's progressing a lot. And from our perspective, what we look at when thinking about the circular economy is also the materials that we're using, which is where we have the largest impact. So we're looking at what materials we can incorporate into our products that have lower environmental impact, but that are also recycled. So we're working heavily on recycled synthetics like recycled nylon, recycled polyester, also fibers like cotton as well. So it's looking how we can incorporate all that into our products. But it also starts from the design perspective as well. We always say that design is the first mile of a product. So if you are from the get-go of a product designing waste out, or if you are really incorporating ways that you can disassemble a product, so at the end of the life, it's easier for that product to be recycled. That's what it's really making that model circular.
Right, right. So if you're designing for circularity, you probably wouldn't use, a blended fabric or something with spandex in it. Is that right?
That's right, and that's something that we always also look at when we think about designing as well. So there are technologies nowadays that, for instance, mechanically recycling a product, if it doesn't contain more than 97% of one unique fiber, if it has blends, as you just mentioned, it's practically impossible. But there are technologies that are, evolving and progressing, and chemically recycling products will allow in the near future. I mean, there are some companies that are already doing that, but in the near future, it's going to be something that will become more popular and become available at a larger scale. Right now, what happens with chemically recycling blends, as you were talking about before, it's something that happens right now at a lab scale. Mm-hmm. So in very small scale. But I think that we're going to be seeing much more innovations in that sense, and the technology will become available at large scale and will allow for those blends to be recycled later on. So it's actually a evolving scenario and an evolving area. So I think that we're going to be seeing a lot of innovations there that will allow for much more innovation in the sector.
Right. Well, that's good news. Maggie, you have two lines, essentially. You have your eponymous Maggie Marilyn line, which is super stylish, super beautiful. And then you have Somewhere, which is basics and stuff you'll wear for 20 years. And so what made you want to make something that was circular, and how do you define circularity for Somewhere?
Yeah, I think for us, circularity is designing to a system that's restorative. So I think the inspiration behind our new line was really taking a lot of the learnings of 2 years being in the industry and realizing the broken system that we were working in, you know, this linear system of, you know, take, make, dispose, and that's fundamentally unsustainable on, you know, a planet with finite resources. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of like going back to school, really, where it was figuring out how do we design a product and look at the full life cycle of that garment, and ensure that it doesn't end up in landfill, and that we're reducing waste, and that ultimately we're having a regenerative impact.
Right. And Chloe and Stuart, for Thousand Fowl, you guys kind of looked at this broken system that Maggie was talking about and made your own roadmap towards circularity. And so when you're creating Thousand Fowl, how did you define circularity?
Yeah. Maybe we both take a stab at this one, Stuart.
Yeah.
But really quickly, just at the top, like separate from even Thousand Fowl, I think Stuart and I have been doing a lot of thinking over the past couple of weeks, even about like how do we talk about circularity and what do we actually see circularity in regards to the new textile economy, or like there's different great partners out there that really break it down, like the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. But what we really see it as, what we keep coming back to, is how do we change or invert kind of the relationship between material and waste, and so that materials throughout their entire life cycle always retain value. And right now what we're seeing and what's wrong with the current system is that once an item of clothing is worn or done, or textile, like it's, you know, you at the production level, you've cut and you have scraps left over, that waste ends up losing value or becoming a liability. And how do we keep those materials in a closed loop system so that they can be recycled and continue to have value even after a product is used? So we're really focused, at least on trying to solve the problems that nothing ever ends up in a landfill, and at the end of a life, the business and the consumer are both incentivized to take care of that product, if that makes sense.
Right, that makes perfect sense. And of course, in order to recycle anything, you need a lot of infrastructure, you need a lot of science, I'm assuming. I'm not a scientist, famously, but Natasha, can you tell us a little bit more about Aeon and walk us through product mapping and tracking at a basic level? Like, what does it, you know, a brand says, I want to be more circular. Great. Where do you go from there?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So we see there's a lot of vision around circular economy, right? This idea of how we keep products in use and how we engage the customer in these new business models and ensure that every product and material gets recycled. And how do we take that beyond intention to actually ensuring that every item that's ever created is managed in a circular life cycle? And that begins by identifying every item. So when we treat products as assets, when something is an asset, we identify it, right? We give it a barcode, we use an RFID, right? We identify that product in some way because it matters. So if you look at the way business happens today, brands identify products in their supply chain because they don't want them to go missing. So every item has a barcode, every item has a number, right? Every item is accounted for. But now when brands have historically sold products, they don't identify them after point of sale. They remove the identifier the moment it's sold because they don't care what happens to it beyond, because there's no systems for managing products after sale. So essentially what Aeon does is we work with the brand to ID that product and embed that identity in the product such that that product can be ID'd beyond point of sale. And so how that actually works is today when a product arrives for resale, a brand can't really, you know, they're looking at that product being like, well, what season is that product and where did it come from? And it's very hard to re-commerce a product. When a product is identified, now a brand can scan it and say, okay, that's my product. I'm going to upload it for re-commerce. It's very hard today to recycle a product because you don't know how to recycle a material unless you know what it's made of, right? You can't recycle cotton unless you know it's cotton. And so one of the biggest challenges with recycling textiles is that in the first place, the recyclers don't even know what the material is, what the content is, what the dye process. And so when you identify the product with us, we include all of that circular ID data, side note, we've developed something called the Circular ID Protocol that ensures that all of that circular economy data can be with the products, such that these products can be ID'd, managed through resale, rental, recycling, and really enable brands to start to go beyond circular economy as a concept to circular economy as a business model and a system that's in practice.
So it's really the logistics. And we've been seeing a lot more of brands having resale on their sites. Nordstrom did it, and Eileen Fisher has been doing it for a decade. So it's important not only for the people that are recycling the textiles, but also for the people who want to buy a 10-year-old Gabriella Hearst coat or something like that. Yeah.
And the thing is right now brands will run those resale or e-commerce as a small offshoot of their business, because it's maybe 1% of their inventory is run through a resale channel. It's not the norm because there are no processes or, operations behind it. And, we view circular economy as the largest global logistics challenge, right? If circular economy is about keeping products at highest and best use, that is the biggest global Amazon ever. So, we all play a part in ensuring that. And, we believe it starts with identity.
Yeah.
And that's our role in enabling it.
Can you run down like the most important product data stats? How did you phrase it? Product data? Yeah.
So basically, we ran a global initiative called the Circular ID Initiative in partnership with a consortium of brands, recyclers, rental partners, groups like Waste Management, groups like H&M, technology partners like SAP, to basically codify what data do you need on a product to identify it in circular economy. Mm-hmm. So what I mean is, in order to resell a product, one of the most important data points that a brand or reseller needs is the original price, right? In order to recycle a shirt, one of the most important data points is the thread type, right? So we basically codified, by working with all of these different stakeholders across the value chain, what data is essential, and then looked to basically define that data structure and work with brands and leading brands to enable that. Right. And enable them to start to associate all that data that they need with each product.
Right. And what are the limitations of current product mapping, of the current product mapping landscape, and how does Aeon address those limitations?
Yeah. So right now, when you create a connected product, there are two components, right? There's one, what do you actually attach to the product to connect it? And Chloe and I have been doing a lot of, research and ideation around this with sneakers, but how do you actually ensure that that identifier can be with the product for the entire life cycle? So that could look like an embedded QR code, an RFID, an NFC, right? And then it's how that actual physical identifier gets connected to the cloud. So the complications exist from both the tactile, we're an Internet of Things company. So it's the internet, right? It's the digital, and then it's also where the internet meets the physical. So how to, start to bridge those worlds is, I'd say, the most complicated piece. It's when things get tactile that they get more complicated and slower and, much more expensive.
Right. Could you give an example of that? Like an example of something becoming more tactile and more expensive?
Yeah. So we work with brands to roll out connected products with a QR code, or, if a brand today uses like a large brand like an H&M and Inditex, they're all using item level RFID in their product, right? It's a hang tag. So every single product that you buy from one of those brands has an RFID tag on it. That RFID tag is on the hang tag, and it's removed the moment that product's sold, right? So that product's not identified after point of sale. In order to embed that RFID in the product and have it be washable, that hardware cost jumps from 6 cents an RFID to 50 cents. So right now, the physical identifiers that are required to enable identification post-sale become, more expensive if you're not working with, a QR code.
Right. That's so interesting.
Yeah.
So Chloe and Stuart, jumping to y'all, it seems like a shoe would be a pretty hard thing to recycle. There are a lot of different parts, a lot of different materials. What was the process like building a full reverse logistics supply chain when you guys were building Thousand Fell?
Yeah, I can jump in and talk about this. It was similar to what Natasha has talked about by getting a bunch of different stakeholders around the table. We had to do it very similarly, but from kind of the product development point of view. And that's design, that's sourcing, that's production, and then it's also the recycling partners. And so the way that we went about the kind of ideating on it is, all right, the things that are a little bit more malleable in that system is like obviously design, and then production, and then materials, and then recycling. Recycling is a pretty hard, larger infrastructure to kind of move on. And so we wanted to make sure that we were designing into that recycling. And Gonzalo talked a little bit about mechanical recycling and kind of what that looks like. And so a lot of our material, or all of our material selections are all like 100% no blends. We can chemically recycle those. And then we worked with a lot of material vendors to kind of pull in and vet materials, both from like the beginning of the supply chain and what they're made out of. Are we pulling out the petroleum and substituting biopolyols or like castor bean oils or corn oils, or these other sort of more renewable oils? And then how does that impact sort of the recycling end of life? And then worked really closely with a couple different recycling partners to make sure that one, we could actually separate the product into these different material streams. And then two, those individual material streams could then be recycled and recaptured and put back into the product. And so literally almost anything can be recycled. You just kind of have to get it to scale. And so what we tried to do was make sure that we were consolidating a lot of those material feeds. So instead of using like poly and cotton and nylon and like spand and all of these different materials, we really consolidated and chose kind of the top or the largest volume materials in rPET, natural rubber, and then food waste. And that food waste, instead of being recycled, actually can be industrially composted, and we can reclaim a lot of that material for actual like soil and regeneration.
Right. And so in the recycling process of a shoe, how much of the shoe do you estimate that you lose in turning one into another?
Yeah, it's a good question. So for us, the way that we've built it, because we have the industrial composting parts, about 80% of a shoe gets recycled into a new shoe. That other 20% is like the footboard that's made from palm tree leaf and the back heel counter that's made from coconut husk that gets composted.
Right.
That being said, like the mechanical recycling is like pretty harsh on materials. And so you actually end up cutting down fiber stocks. You end up like weakening materials. And so you have to actually add materials that can be recycled materials, but recycled materials that have gone through that system like less times. So we estimate about 30 to 40% of a new shoe can be made from an old shoe. And that's about 30% of recycled rubber into the outsole, about 30 or 40% of that recycled polyester goes back in and can be reshred, repelletized, and then re-extruded into yarn to woven into a textile. So it causes a little bit of that. You like lose a little bit of that material every time. That being said, again, to Gonzalo's point, with chemical recycling, there's processes in place, and what the team, for example, over at Evernew is doing is figuring out how do you recapture those materials and actually have like a 1-for-1. So like you have a woven cotton, like how do you then create more cotton fiber kind of exactly 1-for-1 by doing like molecular regeneration? So that's kind of some things that we're thinking about and kind of how we worked into it and working into the current system and then looking ahead at what future state looks like.
Right. I remember when I first saw y'all's shoe, I was so impressed by it. I could hardly believe that it was made with natural materials and that it wasn't real leather. It was the best looking faux leather I'd ever seen at that point.
The hand feels, yeah, our design team has been great. And they always talk about the hand feel. And so like, that was like really important to us to make sure that it felt like the customer wasn't sacrificing. It didn't feel stiff. It felt a lot like leather.
Yeah.
Underscore what Stuart said really quick though, the most important piece was that we started design with the recycling team.
Yeah.
So our recycling partners R&D team selected every material like starting 2 years ago. They were like the first team we were working with hand in hand during sourcing. Again, just so that we could hit the tonnage and that they knew that they could recycle even down to the adhesive, that it wouldn't interact with the recycling and the thread choices.
Right.
I remember when I first met you, Stuart, and I think one of my favorite things about shoes is this intention to actually design for disassembly. I think it's not just for you guys, it's not just the materials, but sneakers are so hard because you actually need these pieces to separate such that each material can go their own way. And that is something that, you know, monstrous shoe companies have struggled with, is that piece of disassembly, because you need the shoe to be strong enough such that it doesn't fall apart when you wear it. So that, to me, when I first met you, what was it, like 4 years ago, was amazing.
Yeah, it's incredibly impressive because I feel like shoes are so much trickier than you know, a plain cotton shirt or linen or something like that. Another thing I find interesting about your business model is that one of the elephants in the room when it comes to circularity is that if the consumer sends something to landfill, it's hard to recapture that. And you guys have a process where people can send their old shoes to you guys, they get a discount, and then that shoe is recycled. And that's how you kind of build that circularity. How did you guys decide on that system? And were there any other systems that you were also considering?
Chloe, do you want to tackle it or do you want me to?
Do your Poland example.
Yeah, this is my favorite example. So, so Poland recently launched a municipal recycling program, very similar to what we have in the States, where they're capturing like 1, 2, and 5 like PET to recycle it, bottles and glass bottles as well. And the initial uptake was like dismal. Like nobody was recycling. And they did the same thing that we did here in the States initially, where you could actually get a couple cents back for every bottle that you brought back. And the recycling adoption rate jumped to like 98%. And so what we've seen is that just in municipal recycling, if you can incentivize people with a rebate or a material credit, that they're much more likely to go out of their way to like return an item. And so what we did is we followed kind of a basic principle for like municipal recycling and just applied it at the consumer level. A couple things like to mention here too is like we also considered other options. Like, could we do a subscription model? Could we do like a membership? And there were sort of two things that we were trying to balance. One is that certain models, like subscription models, like don't incentivize you to hold the shoe longer or to wear it longer. They're like, all right, it's 3 months, like time for a new product, which from like a recurring revenue point of view is great, but from like from a sustainability point of view kind of defeats the purpose of that like durability and that longevity. So we walked away from that. And then a couple of the other models, like membership models, are just a little bit more confusing. And so we really wanted it to be super simple for customers to grasp. There's already so much when like trying to educate about the circular economy that we wanted to focus on as opposed to educating on like a pricing structure. And so we made it super simple. It's like, return it, we'll give you money back. You can use that to purchase new products.
And quickly to build on that, basically the way that a circular economy is ever going to work on a large scale, again, is if both businesses and consumers benefit by something being returned. And so we talked a lot about this at the very beginning, but like, how do we change the idea that you as the consumer, like that I own, this is a Nike jacket that's like 4 years old, that I own this, to I co-own it with Nike, and Nike maybe owns the material, and I as the consumer, I'm like I'm owning the product as long as I want, but when I'm ready to turn it back, Nike wants the value of this material back because they designed into it, they sourced it, they know where it came from, and they can make something new with it and maybe save on cost of goods sold in the new product. And I think that's a shift, and that's kind of it's a shift in how we think about consuming. It's more similar to rental or membership, or co-ownership. And so that was something we were trying to instill with the material credit. Like, it still to be learned if it works on a mass scale, if people are willing to return their shoe for $20 back, or if we've got to continue to test new incentivization structures. But also for us, it was like, instead of from a brand point of view, you can actually build a profitable business, shooting people back dollars that they spent in reclaiming product, and then building a longer term relationship, hopefully, with that customer. So they know that they recycled their product, that they can see exactly where it went and that it didn't go to landfill. They have this longer term relationship with you, and that's not just about constantly selling a new product. So we're actually pinging you after 6 months or 12 months, like, hey, how's your shoe? How's it been going? When you're ready to return it, send it back. Here's a return label. And it's an increased relationship outside of just sales that we think is going to be really interesting for brands to test and work into over the next few years.
Right. Yeah, I'm going to be interested in that in like 2 years to see how the rebate program is working for you guys.
Yeah.
I'll check back in 2022. And so, Gonzalo, you're in an interesting position because you've seen kind of how the conversation around sustainability works in a small company as well as a larger company. I'm really interested in the latter. For a company like Madewell that has so much name recognition and so many, dedicated customers. I have Madewell jeans that I've worn for 7 years. What does the conversation around circularity look like at a company that didn't start as a circular company?
Yeah, so what we look at this initiative in particular is that we're looking at ways that we can keep denim out of landfill and like help our customers to use their denim for as long as possible. So what we do is that we offer repair services in store where customers can bring their jeans and make alterations, repairs, hemmings, all things that can help our customers to use their denim for as long as possible. And that's one of the principles of the circular economy, really making sure that you're able to make the best use out of one product and extend the life cycle of that product. So that's one of the approaches that we have. But then we also know that customers fall out of love from the products, or they, in the end, they use them so much that they are damaged. So we also offer opportunities for customers to bring back denim that they no longer want anymore. And we offer them a solution for them to get rid of that and avoid from the products from going into a landfill. So we have a program that's called Blue Jeans Go Green. And what we do is that when customers are done with their products, they can bring them back to our stores. It doesn't have to be a Madewell jean. It could be any jean that they can bring back. We also have like a rebate program where they get $20 back. And then we convert that denim into housing insulation that we work with partners like Habitat for Humanity for building houses for people who are in need. So through this program, we were able to recycle 1 million pair of denims already. And that has been made into over 1 million square feet of insulation. So it's been a huge initiative. We were actually one of the first retail partners from Cotton Inc. in this initiative. We joined the program in 2014, and we're really happy with how the program has worked out. We are also recognizing the industry for this program. So it's been a really positive initiative. And the things that we're doing now to continue our efforts and really make sure that we're even pushing more is that we recently also launched a partnership with ThredUp. It was launched in late 2019. And it was the first time that ThredUp partnered with a brand to provide an in-store resale program. And we did it in 7 stores across the US. It was also very successful. We are really happy with the results. And it's also ways for, making sure that whenever you are done with a product, you can pass it on to somebody else. And you can continue using that product.
Yeah.
So is the ThredUp partnership like you can go into one of these Madewell stores and you see previously owned Madewell jeans, or is it you can drop off your Madewell jeans and they'll go into the ThredUp system?
It's the first thing that you said. So we're offering in our stores, we're offering pre-used denim. We call it the Madewell Archive, and it is a carefully selected collection of pre-owned denim that we offer for sale in select stores across the US.
That's really cool. And so with Blue Jeans Go Green, a lot of times when I think about circularity, I think about, a shoe becoming another shoe, or, cotton becoming recycled cotton and going into more apparel. But what's kind of the benefit of taking blue jeans and turning them into something like insulation, and how did you guys kind of arrive at that decision?
So that's one of our long-standing programs. It actually launched in 2014. So it was one of our first initiatives around circularity. Right now, Ellen MacArthur Foundation has amazing research, and textile to textile recycling, as you are saying, taking jeans and making another pair of jeans is something that's a little bit, I would say, not so advanced, and only 1% of textiles today are recycled back into textiles. So it's an area of opportunity, and where we know that there's so much more to do. So I think it's a good opportunity. And from a perspective of how the market is evolving, we also see that customers are also interested in that. So if you have that customer demand, that's gonna be pushing brands to do more. So we're excited to see how this evolves, and really excited to bring more options for our customers to our stores as well.
Right. And that's another thing I'm interested in. How do you message this to your customers, and what are some of the roadblocks in explaining to customers, hey, you can bring in your blue jeans, this is what you get, and how do you guys overcome that messaging roadblock?
Well, yeah, so messaging sustainability to customers can be a complex issue, because sustainability itself is a complex area. So, and one of the things is that it could mean so many different things to different brands. So that was one of the challenges also when we started our initiatives, was really how do we break down this complex message into something that is simple enough for our customers to understand. And we realized that it was a process of also educating our customers. We as a brand were learning in our own journey, but we also knew that we had a responsibility to educate our customers. So we knew that we had to find ways to simplify those messages and make sure that we translate into simple things that customers could understand. Mm-hmm. And now we have different avenues. We have our Do Well hub in our website, and that's the go-to place whenever we want to find something about Madewell sustainability initiatives. And that's an avenue where we really try to portray everything that we're doing and become like an agent for education for our customers. So I think that's something really important. And if you go to our website, look for the Do Well area, you'll find a lot of information that's useful of the initiatives that we're doing, the progress that we have achieved. And it's something that messaging is continuously evolving. We're also learning, and we always like to hear back from our customers. We have a very engaged customer that really engages in conversations with us. So we listen what they want, and then we adapt our messaging to whatever they are requiring. So I think that feedback and that constant conversation that we have with our customers is very important to inform how we are messaging sustainability initiatives and making sure that we're able to provide to our customers what they are asking for.
Right. And how is Madewell looking at circular opportunities over the next few years? Can you give us any hints onto what circular Madewell things may be in the works?
Yeah, so we are doing a lot of things. I don't know if you were aware, but earlier this month, we actually released our corporate social responsibility goals. And one of the particular goals is around having 100% of our key fibers sourced more sustainably. So from the get-go, we are looking at what materials we can incorporate into our products that have lower environmental and social impact. So that's one of the things that we're doing. And we're really, we've been progressing in such a short period of time. So less than 2 years, we've been able to incorporate many materials into our products that have that circularity approach. So that's one of the focuses that we are doing. And then we have many exciting things. We know that the partnership with ThreadUp has been successful. So we're also evaluating things that we can do in the future. And I would say stay tuned for more to come, but we're always working, and we're really excited about the things that we have coming.
Oh, can't wait to see them. And Maggie, it's been a good 40, 35 minutes since you told us first about your line somewhere. So maybe could you just refresh our memories a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So like I said, we just launched this new line, and it was really a 2-year journey and definitely labor of love. And like I was saying before, it was essentially like going back to design school to redesign garments that were fit to sit within a circular system and to be restorative by design. So firstly, it was working really closely with our partners through every level of our supply chain. And that's something that surprisingly is more difficult than you would think. I think our industry was really built on like a closed door policy where people weren't always very open with sharing, you know, their contacts and their processes. So being able to go right through the supply chain and work with our farmers, our merino farmers, cotton farmers, and then back up the supply chain took a bit of time. And then I think, like Stuart was saying, looking at simplifying the content of the garments that we wanted to create in order for them to be recycled. So in the new line, we only use merino wool, organic cotton, and regenerated nylon. So yeah, just the complexities around pulling apart a garment that, is a blend of natural and synthetic fibers, a garment that's a natural, predominantly a natural fiber, but then sewn with, a synthetic thread, or has synthetic garment labels. So it sounds simple, but it really was such a journey and process to learn how to design a garment that could ultimately be recycled, but also to design garments that could sit within our customers' wardrobes for many years to come. Like we wanted to create a line that would be everyday essentials. So we knew these garments were going to be worn quite a bit by our customers. So how could we really maximize the life of those garments? Because, there's a lot of energy and resources that is involved in actually recycling itself. So the goal is to keep that garment within the system for as long as possible before actually recycling it. So yeah, we've had a really amazing response to the new line, which is exciting. And I think, like everyone's kind of said on this panel so far, definitely scale is a challenge with circularity, and we're still a small business, so we haven't offered a take back scheme as of yet. And in terms of recycling each garment, the amount of garments that will have to go in that pot, so to speak, to be recycled, might take us a few years. So I think there's maybe something exciting about designers working together, potentially to have some sort of collective collection system or something like that. So yeah.
Right. So right now, do you take back clothes?
Not at the moment. Yeah. So that's the intention, that the garments, that our customer can bring the garment back for store credit. We haven't opened that up yet, as we're just conscious of customers not burning through their clothes too quickly. I mean, hopefully, the pieces in our Somewhere line should actually be able to last a customer longer than a year. So we're thinking maybe in the next 2 years of opening up a take back scheme. Yeah.
Right. And so one thing I'm interested in about Somewhere is that it's also, for lack of a better phrase, a diffusion line. It's a bit cheaper than your main line.
Yeah.
And so I've talked with you about this before, but I love the way you talk about approaching pricing and design decisions for Somewhere. So I would love if you could explain to the group kind of how you approach pricing Somewhere as well, like as a sustainable line, but also as an accessible diffusion line.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we learned a lot through starting the business and being predominantly a wholesale business. Not much of our revenue came from direct to consumer prior to going into launching this line. So we learned, like I said, we learned a lot through the challenges in the wholesale business. And there's multiple people within that system that are essentially clipping the ticket, which is making it more expensive to the end consumer. And I started receiving emails from customers kind of expressing how much they loved Maggie Marilyn and wanted to buy into our values, because those were values that they shared in, but it just wasn't something that they could afford. So it kind of was this light bulb moment for me, I guess, that I'd created this brand with sustainable values, but a brand that not everyone could buy into those values, and that, like, why should sustainability be a luxury? It should be something that everyone can buy into to a certain extent. So I knew instantly that I wanted to create a line of accessible essentials. And so our Somewhere line is a direct-to-consumer only offering. So we managed to get that price point through numerous ways, but specifically not having anyone in the middle, you know, where we have to add an extra margin. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the big barriers to entry with sustainable fashion is that it tends to cost more to pay workers fairly, to pay for organic cotton and something like that.
Yeah.
So that must have been quite the tightrope act to figure out how accessible you can make something while also paying your bills.
Yeah, and I think starting down this journey, it's like we just had to simplify. In order for somewhere to be this like incubator for new sustainable ideas, we kind of had to go back and simplify each product. So each product in the Somewhere line is really simple. They're everyday essentials. And through that, we can really gain scalability because every piece is either white or black. There's no frills, or it's not going to go out of fashion. So it's a line that we can heavily invest in from a units perspective and know that it's hopefully pieces that people will still want to buy our black turtleneck in 30 years time because it's just the perfect black turtleneck. And so, yeah, where we've been able to gain that sweet spot in pricing is not only through our direct to consumer offering, but working with our partners at scale. And yeah, through economies of scale, we could definitely bring the pricing down.
Right.
Yeah.
And you talked a little bit about this with regards to the Take Back program, but what are you planning next for Maggie Marilyn and for Somewhere?
Good question. Well, we're doing a new release this September. So something I was also really passionate about was slowing down the cycle of producing new and putting out new product. And that was one of my frustrations, you know, with our main line and the current fashion system, like, you know, putting out new product every 4 months doesn't allow for product innovation, fabric innovation, and, you know, working on better processes within your business. So we've decided that with the Somewhere line, we'll only do one new release of product a year. So it gives us literally a year worth of R&D to make sure that we're making the best products possible. And so I'm really excited for September for our customers to see what we're adding. And the original offering will still be there, so no one has to freak out about that. But yeah, we'll just be adding to it over time. And yeah, we have some new exciting fabric innovations in the pipeline with that line. So yeah, really excited.
So I want to open up the next couple questions to all of y'all. We've been talking a lot about the benefits of circularity, why everyone should be circular, but what are some of the roadblocks in that brands face in transitioning to a circular business model? And also, what are some of the limitations of circularity? What is circularity not? Anyone in particular want to start?
I'll start with that one, guys, if you want. So from a large brand perspective, what I would say one of the challenges is that there are some technologies that right now they are not yet ready for implementation at larger scale. So even though I would say that there are solutions, they are not yet market ready. So from our perspective, what we do is that we follow very closely innovations in the sector, and we try to stay up to date with everything that's happening in the market. But we know that our brand would not be ready for an implementation at large scale in some cases. So we are always really looking at what the market has to offer, what are the things that we can easily incorporate and adopt that into our collections. And that has been the approach that we have taken since we started this initiative. What we think is that it's always important to make progress, and there are little steps that can help, you know, to move in one specific direction. So by implementing, we are talking about cotton. I think it's important. Yes, organic might be the gold standard, but there are other things that we can do to, you know, begin that process. There are initiatives like the Better Cotton Initiative. So if you're able to make small steps that then can lead you towards a larger scale impact, that's the approach that we should have. And we think that's the way that we can actually make change in the industry also. So I think it's important to see what are the things that you can implement really fast and make those changes really fast. For us, there were clear things that we could be doing that the decision was so simple and so fast that was a no-brainer. But then we know that there are some other things that we need to take a little bit more time to evaluate, understand and analyze if we can implement them. And I think that's the critical approach.
Right. Natasha, as someone that kind of helps brands implement this infrastructure, I'm curious what you think the roadblocks are and what the limitations are.
I think one thing that we see is the customer is a stakeholder in the value chain. When you look at circular, like a brand, when they're producing a product, has a manufacturing partner, and they're responsible for manufacturing with the brand. And then there's a logistics partner, and then there's a retailer. And, we talk about supply chain transparency, and it's about tracking that product and managing that product through, point of production to point of sale. And now the custodian of the product is the customer. So how do we engage the customer digitally and ensure that the customer has the right information such that they can enable the product to be managed in a circular way? Because as we know, when it comes to recycling bins or sorting or any of this, right, it's a behavior of how to ensure that that product gets to the right place. So what we've been doing with brands is, with this connected product, now the customer can scan the product and access the instructions for where to send back that product, where's the best drop-off location, how to care for that product. And ensuring that the customer is engaged and has the right information and is treated like the custodian of the product that they become when they purchase it. And I think Chloe said it quite well, right? The customer is actually the user of the product, and it's kind of a co-relationship where the brand actually needs to be getting that product back if they're going to reinvest in it. So we see, like, a lot of brands will really work so much on, oh, we have this partnership, or oh, we have this, but they're not actually necessarily getting the product back from the brand, from the customer. And so a way to do that is through the connected product and sharing that information with the customer and providing that info. And so that's something that we're getting excited about, because we're seeing when the customers do have that information and that is available, that not only is it that the customer behaviors are changing, but also that it builds in incredible brand equity and loyalty for the brand, right? So if you, instead of going to Goodwill to give back your product, or walking back into, H&M and giving back your product there and, using that as a credit to get something else, you're starting to, treat the retails as not just a point of sale, but as the system, right? The store is now the system. And so I think there's this kind of exciting new wave of how brands can continue to engage with customers and really, service their customers, not just sell to their customers.
Right. Chloe and Stuart, as people who have invested a lot in getting customers to understand that, they're part of a circular economy, what do you have to say about that?
Quickly, I'll kind of agree with Gonzalo here. But we've really, there's so many different barriers to entry to starting a circular line, or to moving big product lines at bigger brands onto not even just circular systems, but just new sustainable fabrics or threads or fibers. And the main issues that we ran into, and we're really fortunate though, because we are a nimble, smaller company, is scale and price. And that starts at the material level. But like when Stuart and I went on a 2-year sourcing journey, and like there's just like material innovation is so new and nascent, and it's out there. There's some fantastic partners that we've worked with over the past 18 months to really develop into Thousandfell. But, we probably tested 40 different materials, and we were on our 8th version of our bioleather. So like there's not that many, and we landed on that version because we could produce it at scale at a cost that could allow us to affordably create the product. But there's really not that many new materials out there that can be treated in that same way. And that same problem, scale and cost, goes for recycling on the back end. Again, in order to recycle our shoes, for example, we're going to have to collect back a few thousand to even turn on the recycling product line. So we're probably not going to be recycling the first batch of Thousandfell until mid next year. And that's a problem that Maggie was also speaking about in regards to scale, is that you need to be able to aggregate across brands, across designers, across threads. And that's where something like Aeon comes in. Because then if you're working with a brand like Madewell that's at a bigger scale, and then a brand like Maggie's brand that's at a smaller scale, but we know that both of them, these two products were cotton that was produced in this way or dyed in this way, and we can recycle them together. That's where this all starts to come together. And so again, it really, for us, those have been the two biggest barriers that at the design phase we had to address: scale and price.
Right.
I don't know if Stuart really runs supply chain, so he might have another.
No, I keep going back to your question too, of like what circularity is and what circularity isn't. And I think kind of the way that we've broken that question down or addressed that question is that anything that diverts product from landfill is a step in the right direction towards the circular economy. And that's anything from, like, as Gonzalo was mentioning, like repair and keeping product in use longer, replacement parts, to resale, and being able to kind of like keep value with your product as long as possible, to actually like physically recycling it. So I know that there's a little bit of debate about like, well, is that really circular? I think kind of the stance that we've taken is that, again, anything that diverts product out of landfill, that keeps product valuable longer, is important. And I think this also ties, I'm like kind of peeking in the chat a little bit about a question someone asked.
Yeah, the chat is very active.
About, yeah, it is. About like the finances of like cutting waste and whether or not it like costs more money. And like, again, kind of Chloe teed this up in that we're trying to shift the mindset to be that materials, even cutting scraps, even used products, are valuable.
Right.
That there's value in those materials. And what we've seen, kind of even at a very small scale, is that those products, like the cost to recapture them and the cost to recycle them, more or less nets out with kind of a cost savings. As you know, you're able to lower cost of goods. So it's really interesting kind of to see all this at scale and see where this recycling becomes a profitable business model.
Yeah, I find that interesting what you and Maggie were both talking about getting to like a critical mass before you can actually recycle. The chat, as we mentioned, is quite active, and I know we're running out of time. So Maggie, would you mind terribly if we moved on to some user-generated questions, or do you have something?
Yeah, no, that sounds great.
Yeah, wonderful. I'm just going to kind of go in order, if that works, Stuart.
Yeah, let's do it.
So this first question is from Antonella. Hi, Antonella, if you're still in here. It's sometimes daunting to keep the facts straight or truly know where to start. Are there tips and tricks that an individual could start with to be a more conscious consumer and to help push forward a circular economy? Since I'm sure we're all trying to be conscious consumers as well. Anyone have any helpful tips or tricks for Antonella?
I would say go
ahead. No, you go first. You're the brand.
I would say read as much as possible, get educated. And then there are a few tips that can help you navigate the sustainability complex world. And what I would say is that look for certifications. There are many standards out there and third-party certifications that can help you understand the claims that brands make. So if they say that they're using like organic cotton, you can see, okay, why is it organic cotton? Is there like a GOTS, Global Organic Textile Standard certification that can prove that? So I would say really understand what are the claims, what are the facts behind the claims, and look for those certifications.
Right. Natasha, did you have something to that effect as well?
To add to that, I think what I see from the brand perspective is they're always talking about what the customer's doing. And it's so interesting to see, you know, firsthand how much power the customer does have. Because these brands are looking to design and meet things and produce things and business models that meet exactly what you're asking for. And one of the things that I see as being the most powerful that the customer can do is actually not just think about what product they're buying, but what model the product is in. So instead of just how do I buy that new product, it's rather, am I buying that product? Can I buy that product secondhand? Can I rent that product, right? So, or can I make sure that that product is part of a circular model? Because basically that is what's driving the brands to invest in circular business models, is the fact that resale and re-commerce is growing 21x out of fast fashion, right? That's what's getting brands to look at this space. And so I think the more that customers, especially at this time where brands are watching you very closely to figure out where people are spending and what their values are, I think participating in circular models with every purchase that you make is crucial.
Right. And I'm kind of paraphrasing this next question from Hoon a bit, but how do you effectively cut through the noise of sustainability as it's becoming more of a topic of conversation in the fashion industry, and even maybe a little bit of greenwashing going on? But Gonzalo, you're saying the importance of certification. Do you find that that's a really important method to cut through the noise? And I'd be interested to know, Chloe, Stuart, Maggie, if you guys have found other ways of cutting through the noise outside of certification as well. But Gonzalo, let's start with you and certifications.
Yeah, so that's really important because you are really able to look at what are the substantiation of those claims. So really making sure that whatever you are saying that you have in your product, you actually have it. And it's something that's verified by a third party. It's not the brand, it's not the supplier. It's usually a certifying body that goes into place and looks at every step of the supply chain and makes sure that, yes, the content is traceable throughout every single step in the supply chain. And you know that in the end, the product that you're buying has that certified material. So I think that's really critical and something. It's an easy way for customers to understand and to navigate the complexity of sustainability. And then another thing that I was also thinking about is it's reporting. Many of the brands now issue annual reports, or they have a page where they show progress. So I think that going through those pages or reports, if the brands have them, it's also important to help identify what's the substance and the meat behind the claims and the actual initiatives.
That's a good point. Maggie, Chloe, Stuart, any ways you guys have found outside of certification, or are you full gung-ho on certifications?
Yeah, I mean, I can see how it would be so challenging for the customer because there's no sort of like global standard for holding brands accountable to the sustainable practices that they say they're operating to. But I think for us, communication and transparency with our customers been really important in gaining their trust. Like the rest of the panelists have been saying, like treating, the customer as a key stakeholder in your business. And we talk about progress, not perfection a lot on our website, and, talking to our customer about, yes, where we're doing well, but also being vulnerable enough to share our weak spots as a brand, and how we're working towards being better in those weak spots. So yeah, I think it's really about that trust.
Yeah, I can jump in and talk a little bit about it. So maybe to frame up kind of also what Gonzalo's talking about as well, is like, it's not as if you go to just like one third party person and say like, hey, will you please come in and verify like the claims that I'm making in my supply chain, which would be great. And so if anybody listening is looking to do that, like we're all the brands are waiting for you to do that. Really what it is though, is that most of these partners and most of these certification processes focus like very specifically on one part of the supply chain. Like the Ethical Trading Initiative will come in and look exactly at like your work compensation and like workers' rights and kind of the human element of it. You can talk with people from like the Sustainable Apparel Coalition to talk about, exactly what materials you've sourced and where those are coming from. You can talk about, or you can talk like Textile Exchange for sourcing. You can talk about like actual LCAs on the actual shipments of it. So a lot of these certifications are pretty complicated, and they're a really great way to verify a lot of it for the customer that really is going to dive in and actually understand it. And I think it's super important. And you're starting to see other people. Like earlier this week, we talked with Sandra at Good On You and about like being able to verify kind of some of these claims and rank kind of where brands sit. And I think that's really great to have that third party. From a customer facing point of view, it's pretty tough because the word sustainability has gotten so complicated. And it means like a million things. Like, is it sustainably sourced? Like, what's it more sustainable than? Like, what are you benchmarking it against? Like, what does it mean for waste? Like, are you like, how are you delivering this stuff? Like, are you just, is it all like slow boat freight? Like, what does that all look like? And so it's really tough. And oftentimes the customer attention span is like 3 seconds on an Instagram ad. So I think what we're seeing is sort of necessary is putting this legwork into education and to putting this legwork into kind of conversations like this around nomenclature and around understanding. And it's really interesting to sort of see what ultimately becomes that sort of catalyst and that tipping point. And what we've seen with sustainability is, and Chloe and I talk about this all the time, is like about 18 to 24 months ago, straws and sea turtles was like the catalyst that all of a sudden people were like, one, single-use plastic is bad. But it's kind of been that conversation that people have been having for the longest time. And so it's making sure that you're educating everybody to now understand about single-use plastics. And like the straws are a very, very small part of that, but it's really like everything that kind of goes into that and having the customer actually being able to ready and understand what's going on. So a lot of that's sort of like legwork on the back end, and then being able to like really focusing on messaging hierarchy and like, differentiation between sustainability versus circularity. And so kind of like working with our creative team to like really hone in on what that messaging hierarchy looks like, but keeping it very simple sort of at the point of contact. And then as people kind of understand the brand and get into the funnel a bit more, telling them a bit more about closed loop systems and certifications and kind of unpacking a lot of that for them as well.
Right. Well, I know, how much more time do we have for questions? I know you said about an hour 10 and
we're about there. Maybe is there like one more that we want to go and we can close off?
We can stay, but if anybody has to jump off.
Yeah,
we could do like 2 more minutes or a couple more minutes. Sarah? Yeah,
if that's okay with you guys.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys.
Perfect.
We can probably leave like one answer per question.
Yeah. We do like one answer per question. We may be able to get through all of these. Okay. So frame your questions quickly, panelists. So this question is from Adam. Will we ever get to the point where we can 100% recycle a shoe or a garment? Is it a technological hurdle right now, or is it just not possible to ever achieve full circulatory basically, is it possible to 100% recycle a shoe or a garment? That's not Adam's fault. It's mine for not being able to speak.
Okay. Anybody want it? I could answer.
You go.
Quickly. So that was kind of the conversation Stuart was having. Right now, like when you recycle a 1,000 shoe, nothing will go to landfill and nothing will be burned. So everything will be like put back into a new product. It's just not 1-for-1, or it'll be upcycled. So that's super possible. Stuart was mentioning chemical recycling. Gonzalo was also mentioning chemical recycling, which is where you like molecularly regenerate a fiber. That's super promising. The problem is it's going to take quite a bit of time to get that up to scale, and the chemicals and the energy involved are quite intense. And so, yes, it will be possible, but I don't know at what scale. And I think that's the problem. So there's still a lot of like R&D and research going into mechanical recycling.
Right.
But I think it is possible to create products that are always diverted from it, that minimize waste as much as possible.
Right.
Gonzalo, I don't know if you want to quickly add to that, but.
I would say that, yes, recycling is the last step, but there are things that you can like steps before. So repairing and making sure that if you have a product that you can mend, patch it, fix it, however, so that you can keep it in use as long as possible. That's where we need to focus right now, where the technology is like continuously evolving. And as you say, Chloe, we know that, yes, it will become available, but it will take some time. But until then, there are things that we can still do. So repairing, reusing also. We know that it's a segment that it's growing faster than the normal retail. So when you fall out of love with your garments, you can resell them and keep them in the loop to avoid what you were saying also, Stuart, like to prevent from things going into the landfills. And then, yes, recycling is an alternative right now, but as I said at the beginning, right now only 1% of textiles are recycled back into textiles. Usually they're put into lower use, like materials or like different alternatives, like as we said before, like housing insulation. But the thing is that, yes, it will evolve, and we just need to be up to speed with the market and making sure that whenever it becomes available at a larger scale, brands are ready to implement it.
Right, that's a great point. This next question is from Nida. Can you speak on the finances in regards to cutting out waste, and if it costs more to rework those materials, or if it's perhaps been a great cost saver in terms of not needing to source as many raw materials?
Yeah, this was the question that I like pulled from with our previous answer. What we found is that it's a lot of legwork on the front end to set up the infrastructure. So like that's really cost intensive. So you're like building two businesses essentially. You're building kind of like your sourcing, and you're also building kind of your reverse logistics business. But once it's set up, we found that it's pretty cost effective if you're designing into materials that already have existing at scale recycling processes. And that's why we've chosen like rPET, and that's why cotton, like those are the two big like materials that are used. And then rubber as well. It's like a pretty big one too. So we, especially as you hit scale, this stuff can actually become profitable. Like you can actually be you lower your cost savings, your cost of goods for new products more than it costs to actually recycle the product.
Right. That's interesting. I wouldn't have necessarily thought that. This next question is from Omar. In light of the recent coronavirus outbreak, how have you been able to effectively circulate your raw materials into new production? So how has coronavirus affected the ability to recycle fabrics or materials? Anyone?
That's a tough one.
Anyone want to take
Maggie, has coronavirus impacted your production at all?
Yes, definitely impacted production, as we haven't recycled a production line yet of product for our Somewhere line. So in terms of recycling the materials, that hasn't affected us. But in general, yes, absolutely. There's delays across the board, especially with things like air freighting. I mean, we do ship most of our products and fabrics, but air freight is like prohibitive. So yeah, lead times have definitely been extended, that's for sure.
Yeah. And Chloe and Stuart, if I heard you guys correctly, right now you're still in the process of stockpiling material to recycle in
yes.
years. So I think that's also a good point, that you're not recycling anything at the moment. Okay, this next question is also from Nida. I'm so sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. What is your dialogue with consumers in the US? Do you find it a challenge with marketing due to the lack of awareness to fast fashion's negative impact? How do you tackle educating consumers while marketing to and reaching consumers? We touched on this a little bit before, but if anyone has something else to add about how you reach consumers with your correct messaging.
From our perspective, one thing that we did that we knew was a way for us to simplify the messaging is that we added a dual label into our products, and that's an easy way for our customers to identify when a product contains some sustainable element. So what it is that whenever a customer sees a dual label sewn into their garments, it's an easy way for us to tell them that yes, it contains some sustainable elements. And we do the same in our website. We have a dual shop where customers can go and see the actual products that are sustainable. And then if they want to dig more and really understand what is it that makes it sustainable, we have a dual hub, which is the place where we direct our customers to really understand the different initiatives that we have and what does it actually mean for the product to carry that label.
Right. That's actually going back to tips for consumers. That's my biggest thing I tell people is be wary if a company says that it's sustainable or ethical, but doesn't get very specific about how. I think that's always a sign that a brand is doing something well if they can really explain why. This next question is from Ashia Johnson. I'm curious to know what the investor community conversations have been like in order to reduce the barriers to entry and to encourage participation in the circular and sustainable economy. Anyone have any investor insight?
Not over here.
Oh, do you want to
Well, we have dabbled in fundraising. I don't know about if there's been a conversation about reducing barriers to entry, but I think that, for example, we were funded by an awesome investment team last year, and they were really excited to be involved with a company that was operating at a price point. So like with $1,000, our whole goal is to innovate at or below $100 with every product we make. And to try to bring like real sustainable solutions to a more mass audience, or not mass, but just something that everyone can afford. And that if you're, in your early 20s and you're working your first job, like you don't have to break the bank to buy something that's sustainable. So I think that price, if I'm kind of reading this correctly, like is a huge barrier for even consumers to participate in a sustainable economy. And I think investors are definitely looking at that. I don't necessarily know though if there are enough investors looking particularly at circularity and fashion. I would say we need more.
What we've been seeing is that overall, I would say like as the market has signaled different ways that they're looking for sustainability or a commitment to social responsibility. And I think that we saw it last year at the end of the year, the Business Roundtable with the announcement that they made. And then at the beginning of this year, BlackRock with the letter that the CEO of BlackRock sent to all of their portfolio companies, that they would not invest in companies that don't have that social commitment. So what I can say is that from an overall market perspective, investors are looking into what companies are doing, and they are also putting their investments behind companies that have that commitment to sustainability and to corporate social responsibility. So I think that overall, without going into like details in the fashion industry, the market itself is getting ready for that and is going into that direction.
Right.
Well said.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that insight. This last question is from Adam, and it's for Maggie. Maggie, do you find that marketing around one line of product a year is a great challenge? How do you keep your customers engaged from a marketing point of view? Which I think is a great question considering the state of fashion at the moment, where we have like 9 collections a year, resort, pre-fall, everything. So how do you keep interested with one drop a year?
Well, we still have our main line. So our main line obviously delivers more than once a year, but we're definitely looking at how frequently our main line delivers as well. But I think the benefit in having a mission-led brand is that there's so much to talk about. There's so much to communicate to our customers in terms of what we do in the sustainability space. I think we've really realized that in a time like now where just pushing product can sometimes seem a bit insensitive. And we've really been able to turn up our storytelling and sharing how we manufacture in New Zealand, sharing, where our fabrics come from, our journey towards circularity, all of those sorts of things. And like I said before, I just think being open and transparent with your customer is so important. I think people don't want to hear that it's all rainbows and sunshine all the time. I think people want to hear the raw stuff and know the challenges that we face as a business. So yeah, that's what we try to do.
You've been very open about that on your Instagram lately. You've been talking a lot about vulnerability from a company perspective as well.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I don't think you always have to have and project the strong front. I think it's okay to have moments of uncertainty as a business leader or anxiety, especially in a time like now. And I think sometimes customers just want to know that you're human like them. So yeah.
Well, that's all the questions. Thank you guys so much. I learned so much from all of you, and thank you to everyone who tuned in. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. And yeah, happy Earth Day tomorrow.
Yes.
So thank you for moderating too. Really quickly, we've also recorded this, and so like we're gonna put it up on our site. We'll share it with all of you guys as well, so you guys can pass it around. So if
Oh.
anybody couldn't tune in live, they'll be able to check it out.
And for those of you that don't know, Sarah is running the sustainability beat at Vogue for fashion. So everyone,
No, I'm running the sustainability beat at Vogue for fashion.
not running it, Sarah,
but I'm fashion news editor.
fashion news editor, but hyper interested in sustainability. So if you follow her, you can continue to kind of get insights on, I just, as a good action kind of going forward from this, if you want to get involved, I would follow Maggie, follow Sarah, follow Gonzalo. He also has another brand he didn't speak about today, but where he imports ethically sourced goods from Latin America. And Natasha signed off, but Aeon Group is also fantastic, and they're great resources to continue to start to immerse yourself in sustainability, sustainable or conscious consumerism, and the circular economy. So I really would recommend like continuing kind of and to watch them along their journey.
Thanks, Chloe.
Thank you so much.
Sorry for that.
Thank you so much,
All right,
guys.
guys.
It was great.
Yeah.
Take it easy. We'll talk soon.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Take care. Thank you very much.